Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Mindset Monday. Thanks so much for joining us. And this is a very special episode. As you can see, I'm not here alone. We've got a special guest. This is Dr. Melvin Smith. He's the professor in the Department of Organizational Behavior and a faculty director of executive education at the Weatherhead School of Management at Case Western Reserve University. And he's also the co-author of one of my new favorite books, Helping People Change, Coaching with Compassion for Lifelong Learning and Growth. And we're going to have a chance to speak more about that in a little bit. Welcome, Dr. Smith. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Erin. Look forward to our conversation today.
Absolutely. And so how I came to know you is through the Neuroscience of Change course that I have been taking for the last couple months, really just for my professional growth and development as a coach. And we got to hear from you as well as one of your other co-authors about the work and the research you've been doing about how to help people change, specifically adults, how to
Right.
help adults change and form these lifelong habits, sustainable change. And when I heard you both speak, I thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be so valuable for CPA candidates, leaders of any kind. People just need to hear about this. So I'm so excited to have you with us and dive
Great.
into this conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. So why don't we just dive in then? So, of course, a lot of the people watching haven't had a chance to read your book, may not be familiar with the work you've done. So, I'm sure it's a lot to boil into sort of in a nutshell. But a
Right.
lot of your research focuses on things that you call coaching with compassion versus coaching for compliance. And you also look at it from a neuroscience aspect, talking about the positive emotional attractor and the negative emotional attractor. I wonder if you can just provide some background for people who aren't familiar with your work yet.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. It probably makes sense and would be easiest to start with what we know about how people change when they do change most successfully and in a sustained fashion. Before we then get to the point of how you help others do that, let's
Mhm.
just talk about the base notion of how people change. And that's one thing that we've learned from the research is that when it comes to change or learning and growing in certain ways, uh, how you think about certain things and or how you're um, approached by others in terms of how you should think about or process certain things ends up triggering you into or putting you into one of two states, as you described. Some things you think about and or things you experience in the world or through others triggers what we call the positive emotional attractor. And when you're put into that zone, uh, what happens is you're experiencing positive emotions, but you also have your parasympathetic nervous system that is aroused. Well, what does that mean? Well, when your parasympathetic nervous system is aroused, physiologically, things going on with your body are your breathing is slower and more relaxed and deeper. Your heart rate is slower, less rapid. Your muscles are more relaxed. You actually are more capable of kind of thinking, expanding your view, being open to new ideas, etc. And simultaneous with that parasympathetic nervous system arousal, from a neural network activation perspective, your empathic network tends to be activated, which again is very similar to what you see with the parasympathetic nervous system activation as the mind is concerned. You're more open to new ideas and to others. You're more capable of thinking creatively and in innovative ways. And again, it just facilitates your ability to learn and grow in that state. Now you contrast that with the other alternative. Sometimes the way you think about things and or what others trigger in you or the outside environment triggers in you, uh, those things put you in what we call the negative emotional attractor state. And with the negative emotional attractor, again, obviously you experience negative emotions, but you also experience what we call the stress response, where the sympathetic nervous system is more highly aroused. And
Mhm.
when the sympathetic nervous system is aroused, just the opposite things I just described just described are occurring. So if you think about that fight or flight response and what happens when that's triggered, that's what's going on when the sympathetic nervous system is aroused. Your muscles tighten up, your heart beats faster, your breathing is more rapid and shallow. From a standpoint of your brain and your mind, the blood flows from your brain to the large muscles in your body to prepare you to protect yourself, so you can't think as clearly, right? So you lose that capacity to think clearly, to learn, to grow, etc. Your peripheral vision is even reduced, and you're focused on just those things immediately in front of you. So this is the survival mechanism that kicks in, and while it enables you to survive, it actually inhibits your ability to learn, grow, and change when you're in that negative emotional attractor state. So I'll stop there for a moment and see if you want to, which aspect of that you want to explore further. But that's basically what's going on when people are able to change, or in some cases not change. A lot of that is driven by the neural activity and what's going on with you physiologically, depending on whether you're in that positive or negative emotional attractor.
Yeah. Well, maybe an example would be helpful. So say I'm just a person, I'm taking on a well-being goal. I want to either lose weight or have a healthier lifestyle. What would be different for me if I'm holding it as, and coming from that positive emotional attractor as opposed to the negative? Not just physiologically, but maybe even in my experience of it.
Right. Yeah. So that's great. So to root it in an example like that, what happens is, and this is what often happens when others try to help us change, going back to that notion of coaching with compassion, as we call it, and coaching for compliance. Quite often people try to help us change by telling us what we need to do or what we have to do. Similar to what you just described in terms of a weight loss goal. If I feel like, oh, I have to lose weight. Well, that puts us in a certain state where again, all those things physiologically occur that I just described, but just in terms of your mental state, there's just this feeling that there's this work that has to be done, and there's just this sense of kind of the drudgery associated with it, or that feeling of guilt if I'm not doing it, or fear, what if I can't do it, etc. And all those things actually end up inhibiting your ability to actually achieve the thing you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Now, if you can frame that differently, so if someone's trying to help us, if instead of kind of coaching us for compliance, for the telling us what we have to do, if they can instead do what we call coaching us with compassion, where they help us think about, okay, what would I love to do? What would I love to achieve? And what would my ideal future look like? And so in the example of, well, instead of losing weight, what if I framed it as, I want to be in, the best of health, or be at my ideal, physical capacity or body, so you think about from a positive perspective, something that really gives you a sense of energy and excitement when you think about it, and positive emotion, seeing myself in that ideal state. And then you figure out, okay, what are the things I need to do to achieve that ideal state? And that's just a very different perspective. It feels much lighter. It feels energizing. It feels motivating. And it gives you the enthusiasm and the energy to exert the effort on a sustained basis to get to that ideal state. And that same energy is often not released when it's framed in the other way as this thing that I have to do, this negative thing that I have to lose this weight. You just don't have that same energy and enthusiasm and motivation to do the work necessary to get to the goal. So that's a key difference in how you frame it in terms of what the outcomes ultimately end up becoming.
Just seems like it would be such a more pleasant experience, a lot easier to stay motivated, not have to suffer through it. I meant when you were talking about that first one, I'm just thinking like, oh, having to build up that motivation every single day, and it's just a struggle, which I think is why a lot of
Exactly.
people don't stick with things like that. They do it for a little while and it's not sustainable.
You're exactly right. And that's why the approach that we use when helping others, we call it coaching with compassion, but we also call it coaching for sustained desired change. And And that's just exactly what it does. When you kind of frame it in that way that feels good and feels energizing and motivating, it doesn't feel so much like the effort that's hard to sustain. And you're excited to work on it. You want to do it, and you want to keep moving forward until you reach that goal or that ultimate dream that you have in your head. So yeah, it is a much more pleasant experience, and that is what enables you to sustain that effort for much longer periods of time than if it's this drudgery you're getting through to, achieve this thing that you feel you have to achieve.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And so we, of course, are going to talk specifically about how this applies to the CPA exam. But part of what I loved and what resonated so much is that really this applies to anything, any goal you're taking on in your life. So I think it's a valuable piece of understanding to have about how
Yeah,
we operate in life. But so
exactly.
let's shift gears to specifically the CPA exam. And I'll share just a fun fact that I learned about you in setting this up is that you actually considered taking the CPA exam at one point.
I did. I did. I was an undergraduate accounting major. I had decided, uh, uh, by the time I graduated, I didn't want to go into public accounting, so I was going to go into corporate accounting instead. But I still, even though I didn't need the CPA at that point, I really had this feeling that, man, I'm an accounting major. I really need to get a CPA. I really ought to get the CPA. So I was planning on sitting for the CPA exam. So I was working during the day. I'd signed up for the Becker CPA review course and was,
Mhm.
driving, the distance to go take that course at night after work. And it was drudgery because, again, just to that example we were just talking about, I was viewing it as something that I had to do,
Mhm.
needed to do, because it's just what sort of accountants do. They take the CPA exam.
Right.
There was no real kind of fundamental joy associated with it or excitement around what if I, attain it, et cetera. It was kind of really this thing that I felt I ought to do. And
Mhm.
as a result, in the midst of that process, I decided, look, this is not worth it. So I never even sat for the exam. I just decided, like, I don't want to continue this effort to go through this drudgery. I'm working all day and then taking this review course and then coming home and studying. So it just wasn't enjoyable enough for me to kind
Mhm.
of continue the effort and pursue it. And again, I think partially because of the way that I had framed it for myself.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a really normal place. A lot of the people that I work with and in how a lot of organizations, especially public accounting firms, but I actually think some corporate organizations now, it is something that you have to do, or
Right.
else certain jobs aren't available to you. A promotion up, past the manager level, for example, is not available to you. So
Yeah.
if I'm coming at it from that place and I'm taking the exam because I have to get this promotion for the job, the next level job that I want,
Mm.
how might that impact my ability to learn as I'm studying?
Yeah, so if that's the only frame that you have, is that have to, and I'm doing it because I have to, and if I don't, then this career path is not going to be open to me, or I'm not going to be able to keep my job at the firm, et cetera. Doesn't mean that you won't be able to ever pass the exam, but you're actually decreasing the likelihood you're going to do well because you're inhibiting your ability to truly learn and grow if you're stuck in that negative emotional attractor state, with that triggering of the sympathetic nervous system and all those things that I described.
Mhm.
Now, one thing I didn't talk about, we talked about this positive versus negative emotional attractor. And even though being in that negative emotional attractor can inhibit your ability to learn, grow, and change, and actually achieve some of the things you want to achieve, it doesn't mean you're never in that state or never want to be in that state, because those things are helpful. I mean, we have that mechanism within us because it does facilitate our survival. So we
Mhm.
need to spend some time in that negative emotional attractor state and feel that stress that sometimes spurs action, spurs attention, spurs effort that's necessary. The key is the balance or the degree to which you're there. So again, back to the question, if you're always and only in that negative emotional attractor state, like if I don't achieve this, I'm not going to be able to become a partner. If I don't achieve this, I'm not going to be able to keep my job at the firm. If I, then
Mm.
that's going to inhibit your ability to learn. Now, if instead you think about, okay, I have to do this or I need to do this, but you also anchor that have to do this in the context of a bigger or broader dream, like if I or once I achieve or pass the CPA exam or earn my CPA, then it's going to enable me to, and then you think about what's your ultimate dream. I want to be a partner in the firm. I want to be able to do this or that. I want to open my own, accounting firm. Whatever it might be that you want to do, you should hopefully have some positive energy and enthusiasm and motivation associated with that dream. And again, you still have this negative emotional attractor that kicks in. Well, I really need to study for this exam. I'm going to pass this exam. But again, you keep anchoring it back to, if I go through the hard work necessary to pass this exam, it's going to unfold this part of my life that I'm really looking forward to, enable me to achieve the dreams that I have. So having that balance back and forth between that positive and negative emotional attractor is really the key to success. And one thing we talk about and we learn from the research, not only ours, but work of others, is you need in general at least a 3-to-1 ratio positive to negative emotional experience to truly bring about, sustained change and successful change. So again, it's about balancing that positive and negative emotional attractor. So the really want to, love to, why I want to do this, and the need to, ought to, have to associated with passing the exam.
Right. So we don't want to eliminate that completely. We just want to have more of the positive than the negative.
Exactly. That's the formula for success.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I hear about that all the time, the dread, the fear of failing, all of that. It just seems like that's a more natural place that people come from with this exam. And so it's a little bit of a stretch to get to that positive place, that it would make a huge difference.
Yeah, it really is. And that is the default. And that's why when it comes back to one of the earlier questions about coaching with compassion or coaching for compliance. So if you think about helping someone else in their change, or in this particular case, helping someone else to, pass the CPA exam, thinking about how you might coach them in such a way that causes them to reflect on those elements of the dream, those experiences that put them in that positive emotional attractor space, that will be very helpful. Now, you typically don't have to consciously and intentionally prompt that negative emotional attractor. We get enough of that in our lives just naturally. We automatically go there. So typically the work as a coach is to not create that because that's there, but to make sure that people spend enough time in that other space as well to balance that out or to offset that negative emotion and stress associated with that, again, feeling of dread and ought to and have to.
Yeah. So I think you've talked about some of these things about, the difference in being in the positive emotional attractor, helping you to think more creatively, be able to see a bigger picture. I wonder if we could just drive that point home about how that would impact your ability to learn and retain information if you're in PEA as opposed to the NEA, or at least having that good balance, the ideal balance.
Right. So I think it's from a couple perspectives that we've talked about. Like number one, just your frame of mind and being in that more lighthearted space where it just feels better in that positive emotional attractor space. So your overall disposition, your motivation to want to do what's necessary to get to that next step. There are just a number of things just in terms of from that perspective alone that will make it more likely that you'll sustain the needed effort to achieve the goal. But above and beyond that, it's physiologically, again, we know for a fact that when you're in that positive emotional attractor space, that's when neurogenesis can occur. So you're actually capable of making new neural connections, in the brain. So you're physiologically more capable of learning, growing, and changing and performing when you're in that state, right? So not only in terms of how it feels and your energy and motivation to sustain the effort, I mean, physiologically in that positive emotional attractor state, you're more capable of learning, and which is going to facilitate your ability to achieve the goal. Now, again, it's that balance or imbalance 3-to-1. So you still want to have that dose of stress and the need to, and here's what I need to do, and the focused attention toward passing the exam. But again, if you're in that space too much, strictly in that negative emotional attractor space, you're going to close down your ability to learn. It's not going to feel very good. You're less likely to sustain the desired or needed effort. And ultimately, just that stress is just going to burn you up. And again, really diminish your capacity to perform in the end.
So what about, I'm just imagining people might be watching this thinking, nodding their head just like I have been, like, yep, that's me. I can see myself doing that. I do
Right.
that. But I wonder about, or I guess I'm imagining that if I'm sitting at home studying, it's going to be a whole lot easier for me to think about that, those positive things that I'm excited about, my future and everything. And then I get to the testing center and it is the day of, and maybe I have some, fear around testing, the pressure's
Right.
really on, slide back into that negative emotional attractor, right? And so,
Yeah.
are there things that you can do in the moment to get back to a good place where you are performing at a higher level?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So there are things. So there are a number of ways you can put yourself into that positive emotional attractor, um, or that parasympathetic nervous system arousal
Mhm.
state. Um, there are four pathways we often talk about in terms of things people can focus on to get into that space. One is being more mindful. So just engaging in some form of being present and in the moment, just focusing on your breathing, for instance. Uh, Exhibiting hope. So having this mindset of a hopeful or positive view of the future. So if you can keep yourself in that hopeful state.
Mhm.
Showing compassion to others. Um, it's other related, but there's a side benefit that when you're showing compassion, demonstrating compassion to others, it puts you in that parasympathetic nervous system state in that zone. So just being able to think about, get outside of yourself and think about others and show compassion toward others. And then finally, just playfulness and joy. So being able to think about something that kind of brings you joy, or just having that playful mindset, or just laughing. So those are a number of particular
Mhm.
pathways that we've talked about to put yourself in that parasympathetic nervous system state. Now, in the context of sitting for the exam, to me, one of the things I would recommend would be, and it's really at your disposal, it's kind of really in the mindfulness space, but really just focusing on your breathing. So
Mhm.
one thing that I do regularly, just in terms of going into my normal day and the stresses and strains and challenges associated with that, is I try to engage in a morning meditation before I start whatever I'm going to do. And you
Yeah.
don't have to be this person that's really into meditation. You have this very developed, meditative practice or meditation practice. There are a number of kind of free and or easily accessible tools to do very simple and easy guided meditation exercises. You can do a 5-minute guided meditation or a 10-minute guided meditation. So one thing I would recommend is, if someone has anxiety around taking the exam, is to just kind of take some time, go to one of the apps, like Calm is one of the apps,
Mhm.
Headspace is another, Insight Timer is another. All three of those have free options, and just a plethora of kind of brief guided meditations. So find a spot where you can take just 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Uh, it's kind of just with you. Close your eyes and go through just a brief guided meditation, focusing on your breathing. And I think you'll find you can put yourself in that state, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden that anxiety begins to kind of just melt away, and you find yourself in this peaceful, calm, present state where now your mind is ready to function and at its best, and you're ready to kind of read through that exam and kind of the answer. So you're just in a much better state than
Mhm.
if you kind of didn't do that and prepare yourself and just went into it in that stressed out, frenzied, breathing rapidly. Oh, I'm not going to pass this exam. So there are things you can do to pull yourself out of that. And probably the easiest one is just a brief period of guided meditation, or even if it's just a period where you just sit down and just concentrate on your breathing and just
Mhm.
focus on breathing deeply for just a few minutes. To
Yeah,
me, that's the best recommendation, or the
I love it.
easiest recommendation to implement.
And that's something that you can start doing right away. You can do that throughout your studying process. I love to incorporate that as part of like my pre-study routine for clients.
Right.
You meditate, then you study. So then it's a normal thing for you to meditate, and that sort of triggers the, okay, time to go work on this now. And in that case, it would be the test.
Exactly. Yeah,
And
no, that's great that you're already doing that with your clients. Yeah.
yeah, I've even talked to them about, if you notice yourself getting really stressed or panicked on the test, just take your hands away. You can't step, necessarily, you don't necessarily have time to leave the room every time that
Right.
happens, but just step away, close your eyes, give yourself a minute and then come back.
Yeah.
instead of just
No,
powering through.
yeah, no, that's great that you already advised them, because that was the next thing I was going to say. That even during the exam, if you're aware enough to know when you start feeling tense, so maybe there's a question you get to and you think, oh man, don't, and all of a sudden like you're starting to panic and you're stressed. To your point, just step back away from the exam for a moment, and even if it's just a single deep breath. I mean, if that single deep breath can even kind of hit the reset button and bring you back, or if you need to take a minute and just focus on your breathing, just kind of, again, reset, get yourself back in that calm state, you're then going to be better able to kind of think through and work through whatever that problem on the exam is, or work through the exam itself. But it requires being aware enough to sense when you get all tightened up and you're in that stressed out state, even during the exam, and being able to kind of back away from that and then get yourself back in that state. And to your point, if you've practiced that while you've been preparing for the exam, you're going to be better able to continue that type of thing when you're in the midst of taking the exam. So yeah, great suggestion. Don't do it just for the exam, do it in your preparation process as well.
Right. Yeah, leading up to it.
Yes.
I think that's good. Good. Well, my clients are probably watching this thinking like, oh, I see where she gets all her methods now. This all makes sense.
Great. Well, I'm glad to see you're already doing many of these things. So that's good. That's probably why you're so successful in helping people in the way that you do.
Getting a little peek behind the curtain here today. That's great. Well, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about your book too. I have it here. I've got my
Great.
flags. I reference it often. And like I said, it just has made a huge difference for me. It completely resonated with the work I do, not only on the CPA exam, but just in my work of helping people as a coach. But I think a lot of folks watching this may be wearing that dual hat also, where yes, they're a CPA candidate, but they're also perhaps in a supervisory role. So what else would you like to share about this?
Yeah, right. No, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. So so we wrote the book with a broad audience in mind. Coaches, as you said, definitely have found the book to be beneficial, very helpful for them as they think about how they might coach others more effectively. But we wrote it. In fact, we entitled the book "Helping People Change," as opposed to just coaching people, because anybody in a helping relationship, whether it's a manager or a physician or even a parent or a friend, I mean, we all engage in relationships with others where we want to help them in certain ways. And this approach that we write about and talk about can apply broadly to a number of these circumstances or types of relationships. And we wrote the book in a very accessible way. We talk about, as you've seen from reading it yourself, we share stories, like real life stories of people and their successes and their own efforts to change, or in being helped by someone else in their own change efforts. We share and draw upon considerable research. So these aren't just kind of ideas that we've come up with.
Right.
Everything we talk about in the book is substantiated with a significant amount of research. But if you're not into all the details of the research, we've kind of positioned it in kind of research spotlights in many cases. So if you want to go deeper into the research studies, it's there for you. If you want to kind of just hit the higher points in terms of what you should do and how it's going to make a difference and read the stories, you can do that as well. So we made it where it's reader friendly. We also have a number of exercises, whether reflection exercises, conversation guides to talk about some of these things with others. So we tried to put some things in there for everyone and make it a very light, enjoyable read, but also a practical tool that you can kind of take and put to use and grow in your ability to help others change, as well as in your ability to engage in successful change yourself. And one more thing I'll share is this summer, we're coming out with an app to actually support the book. So for those of you who are into kind of technology now and you want things in the palm of your hand and said, how can I have an easily accessible way to put together the ideas, presented in this book and to put them in application or to practice. We have an app that's coming out that we're really, really excited about. It'll be of the same name, Helping People Change, but it'll be a 21 session app that you can kind of go through exercises, activities, breathing exercises, meditation. So a number of things right there in the palm of your hand in the app. So we're really excited about that as well.
That's great. And so when is that coming out?
We don't have an official launch date. It'll be sometime this summer. But if anyone is interested, you can find more information or sign up. The site for the app is helpingpeoplechange.app. So
Okay.
really, really easy. Helping people change that app. You can kind of sign up for information. So you'll be given information when it is available. And if you're interested, you also might be selected in case you're interested in being a beta tester to test it out before it actually hits the market. So
Oh, very cool. All right. And I'll be sure to keep my eye out too. And I'll make an announcement again
awesome. Perfect.
for everybody. Well, I think you did a great job of finding that balance in here too. I thought it was super applicable right away, which I always love, and easy tools to implement. I did my bucket list exercise with the post-it notes not too long ago, but it also really satisfied the nerd in me that wanted to dig into the data and everything too. So highly
Awesome.
recommend this for anyone
Great.
who is in that role of helping people grow and change.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to add? This has been so helpful.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, again, just remembering, again, those PEA, NEA, positive emotional attractor, negative emotional attractor, and thinking about maintaining that balance, if you will, but really more imbalance, at least 3-to-1, PEA to NEA, positive emotion to negative emotion. And not just for your learning and growing and passing the CPA exam, but just in your life in general. If you can kind of just remember that and try to focus on making sure that you experience more positive emotion in your life than negative, it'll just change your life dramatically. So I encourage all people to think about that and
Yeah.
work on that as a personal practice.
Wouldn't that make the world a better place? I think
It
so.
really would. It really would.
Well, thank you so much for your time and for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. And I know everyone's going to get a ton of value out of this, and we're going to create a lot of CPAs here.
Terrific. Well, I look forward to that and maybe having my taxes done by one of these
There
CPAs.
you go. I'll send them your way.
All right. Well, good spending time with you today, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you.